right, it is 5 o'clock. Welcome to our Transitions Negotiation Workshop. I am Stephanie Eberle. I'm the Assistant Dean of the School of Medicine's Career Center. How many of you knew you had your own Career Center? Awesome. You do now if you did not already. Thank you for coming. True or false, you should always negotiate. Yes. True. Okay, why? There's always a better solution. Okay. What if I've offered you 20% more than you thought you were going to get? Well, then I could get 40% more. Any other thoughts? So that's typically the rule, right? That you should always negotiate. And in some situations, this is true, especially considering that when you look at, say, gender, for example, when we look at research on why women make 72 cents to the male dollar. First of all, that number, do you know, does that apply across all fields? No, which fields does it not apply to? Or what are some? Care providers, consulting, as well as, say, computer sciences. So computer sciences has some of the lowest inequitable salary. Some of that is because we can physically show parity, right? Within consulting, it's because they have set numbers, and we just don't negotiate in consulting typically. This is relevant, though, because when we look at why women make less, it's often because they don't negotiate. And this makes a difference, because if you don't negotiate, if I start with more than you, then throughout a lifetime, if let's say I start with 20% more than you, over a lifetime, I could be making $100,000 more than you at the end of our retirement. And that could be the difference between me driving around in my retirement village in a Lamborghini and you driving around on your bicycle. So yeah, so to some extent, sure, it does. Here's another scenario. I had somebody one time interviewing for a job in our office, and she was coming from a consulting firm. And she said to me, she says, well, I'm looking at coming to your office because I want a better work-life balance, which started things off badly, by the way. But, okay, I want a better work-life balance. And I said, all right. So it is my job to know how much you make in consulting. And I know you're making more than you're going to make in this job. This is the salary you're going to be making. Are you okay with that? And she said, yes. So it comes time to talk about salary. I make her an offer. Should she have negotiated? She did. And she asked me for a salary. She gave me a number that was higher than what I make. And at that point, I did not want to hire her. And I was glad she turned us down. The thing about negotiation is it's about a conversation. It's about listening. And we have to think about this in several terms. So it's like an orange. Okay. So our Associate Director, Ria, over here. Right? And then our program coordinator, who's not here, Elizabeth, they come to me and they say, Stephanie, we have a problem. I have an orange. We have one orange and we both want it. What do we do? What do you do? Two people want an orange, there's only one. Split in half. That makes sense, yeah? Not necessarily, because Ria just wants it to eat, and Elizabeth wants to use the peel for a craft project. The correct question is, why do you want it? And it's the same with negotiation. The more we assume we know, the more problems we get into. It's a conversation. Let's look at let's talk about that a little bit. And this comes from building consensus model. So let's play the $1,000 game. Imagine you're one of 10 people all sitting around one table. Someone comes in and says, I will give a prize of $1,000 to each of the two people who can persuade the person sitting opposite to get up, come around the table, and stand behind his or her chair. You understand the prompt? You have to move quickly. What do you do? Offer part of the prize money to the person across. That's an option. So you're like, maybe you $500 for each of us. Awesome. And we switch it off together. Yeah. What is the pro to offering half and half? It's quick. It's quick and easy. We all kind of win. We don't get everything, but we get something. Yeah? What about the pro to yours? We both get $1,000, right? Are there any negatives to either option? Well, we don't get anything if the person says no, and it's kind of a risk to put yourself out there and offer. Are there any other options? You could split all of the money, right? So we could just put it together and we could share it all, yeah? That's one nobody has come up with. I love it, thank you. Okay, as it turns out, there's a lot of different options. Number one, we could decide not to play. And this goes to the first question of, do we have to negotiate? Some people choose not to negotiate. You don't really have to negotiate. Sometimes if it's more than what I was expecting, we don't have to. If I know they don't negotiate, if I know that this is a job that I'm taking for more personal reasons and I'm not doing it for the money to begin with and I know they don't have a lot of money, I don't have to negotiate. If I don't like negotiating, I don't have to. There are pros and cons to the choice, but you do not have to do it. And this is the benefit. This is the avoider. They don't want to get involved. They don't like stress. Actually, everybody's pretty happy. And they're hard to negotiate against because they just refuse to play. The second option is the accommodator. And start thinking here where you fall. Right? Nobody said I'm not going to play, but it's kind of ironic because some people didn't raise their hand. Maybe you were just refusing to play. This is why, again, the avoider is sort of hard to negotiate against because they just are stubborn. Option two, you can run over and stand behind the chair of the other person, and you hope that they'll share. So that's an option. It's a lot of trust, and they like you still. The person against you, or the person opposite you, still likes you. And you're trying to think about what they want. So it's one of the more friendly options, right? Now, of course, you could be wrong. And they may not accommodate you, and you may get nothing. But for an accommodator, that's worth the risk sometimes. Option two, you can yell to the person sitting across from you that they should run over and get behind your chair. So this is the opposite of the accommodator, right? And this is the competitor. And I love the competitor because sometimes the competitor will even lie. If you actually play this out in some circumstances, you'll get people who are like, I would come to you, but I have a broken ankle, right? So this is a competitor that's trying to get you to come over and do their job for you, okay? They're not as liked sometimes within negotiation, but they do sometimes get what they want, right? And they like to win, so they're very competitive, and they'll stay in the game for a pretty long time. Option four is what you were suggesting. The person across from you is offering $500 to stand behind their chair, take the deal. Even if you made the same offer to them, it doesn't matter. This is the compromiser. So this is the person who is willing to, say, maybe sacrifice, is willing to take a little bit less to sacrifice the relationship and the opportunities. And then finally, this is your option here, which was, I say to you, hey, get up behind me, I'll go behind you, and we're all happy, right? A lot of people think this is the right answer. This is the collaborator. And as we'll see, there's not necessarily a right answer, but there is a nice flow to negotiation that works as we go. There is a downside to the compromiser, which is it relies on a good, solid relationship between the two of us. And there are different types of negotiation, as we'll see here in a few minutes, where this would work and sometimes it doesn't work. It is a vulnerable position to be in, to ask somebody to move, and if you don't trust each other, you may not do so. This reflects the dual concerns model. So if you can see, on one side is concern about others and then concern about your own outcome. Okay. So when we think about negotiation, we want to look at our zones carefully. Somebody has given you, say, a job offer, or they're asking you or they're offering you an opportunity to work I don't know, to a network or something to that effect. So we don't have to always talk about money. Negotiating with our partners, also an option. This could be applied there. But the comfort zone is where the person with whom you work is most comfortable. And then the zone of intolerance is where you feel most comfortable. We're trying to go with a zone of tolerance so that not everybody has to be happy, and we're not completely satisfied, but not everybody's unhappy either. So when you look at, I will send the slides out later, there is a test that you can take. It's the Thomas Kilmann conflict battery, and you look at what area, where you feel most comfortable in terms of negotiation, okay? And knowing this about yourself ahead of time is very useful. Knowing this about other people is also very useful. You can notice how your partner in this negotiation is reacting. And if you right away notice their accommodator, then you have a choice. You can move to their accommodator and be very similar and accommodate as well. Or you can use another one of those patterns to complement that behavior. This is one of the first parts of negotiation, is knowing yourself really well and knowing what to look for in your partners. What we're talking about is human dynamics. There's two parts to human dynamics. The first part is the importance of the relationship, and the second is the perceived conflict over the stakes. So how important is the outcome? How important is the relationship? There are different types of negotiation. When we look at the first type of negotiation, the one we're going to focus on the most today is our business partnerships, so with a job. With our job, we care deeply about the relationship, and we want to minimize conflict. We care deeply about the outcome. This is important because it influences how hard we negotiate. It influences what we ask for, when we ask for it, why we ask for it. And I'm going to give an example. So I had a friend once who was negotiating for a job. And as it happens, it was her dream job. This is important because the more we care about the job, the more we care about the relationship. Yes? Can we agree? Yeah. Okay. So this was going to be a very high move up for her, and she still wanted a new title change. Okay, title changes are not abnormal to negotiate for. She still asked for $25,000 more than the offer. That's not normal. The average ask above offer is between $1,000 to $5,000. That is average. The average ask above. Okay? Doesn't mean you cannot ask for more, especially if you have statistics to show that yes, you are worth more, right? If you have more, I always say to my staff, that if you can make a case for it, then yeah, we can do it. You have to make the case for it. But you need to know that average. That is also an important thing to know about salary.com, for example. So we can look at what our worth is by looking at things like Glassdoor and salary.com. You should know, however, that's about $5,000 off. That's self-reported income and self-reported salary. It is not reported by employers. The number one resource for that's reported by, it reports starting salaries from employers. That is the Radford Guide. And it costs a significant amount of money. And if you had that much money, then you probably wouldn't need a job. But it's, yeah, we have worked with Radford in the past, so it's something that we can talk about one-on-one sometimes, but in general, the best you have is salary and Glassdoor. That is okay, but understand they're about 5,000 off, about 5,000 maybe higher often than what the reality is, or what our recruiters say the reality is, okay? Okay, so anyway, so she asked for a lot more. Then she wants a corner office. The corner office was somebody else's. It belonged to somebody else. So they kicked somebody else out of their office in order for her to have a corner office. Then she negotiated a start date of 2 months later than was offered, then they wanted her. They gave it to her, which, kudos to her. Would you say that's a good, successful negotiation? Well, she got what she wanted. But what do you think people thought of her when she started? Yeah. She left about a year later. And a lot of it was because of environment. Right? So we do want to think about that relationship and how important it is. Then, of course, when we see it side by side, this is like the personal side of things, right? So when we look at the personal, our family, we care a lot more about the relationship than we do about outcome, in theory. Now, some families, we don't know, right? But then we've got our transactional relationships, which are more like car dealership, and then our tacit coordination, where we don't know them at all. The split here is integrative relationships versus distributive. And we're going to do very different things when we're in those types of relationships. The top is integrative relationships. I'm going to see you again, and I care about seeing you again. So that is why I do want to compromise, or why I do want to know what your negotiation style is, so I can match it, or so that I can complement it. And I'm going to watch that. And how we negotiate now also does influence how we work together. If I'm not enjoying the negotiation with my new boss, I probably don't want to work there. This is our first semi-conflict, or we're seeing it as conflict, and this is problematic because they can't even handle a request for a week late start date, right? Underneath, we're a little harsher when we're looking at the distributive relationships, because we don't care. The car dealership, the first thing I do with my car, when I negotiated my car, I came in and said, "Hi, this is my offer." And it was very funny because they didn't watch me. They came in, they said, "We can't do it." I said, "Okay." I walked back, and they said, "Well, let's show you the car. Let's show you what we're doing." And so I think their goal was to show me a little more about the car and to convince me. I said, "Okay." So I spent a long time with them. And at the end of the day, we got down to $1,100, which in car world is nothing. To me, was everything. And what they didn't understand was they were not my first choice. And they didn't bother asking me if it was my first choice. They didn't ask me what what I wanted. So when it got down to $1,100 and I said no, and they said no to me, I looked at my friend and I said, "Oh, I guess we're going to go to Mini Cooper." And I got up and walked. And they came running out the door and said, "Wait a minute, you love this car." And I said, "I love this car for $1,100 less. And I'm not driving a Mini, I'm driving a Fiat." Because then they offered me $1,000 or $1,200 off. But I'm not going to do that necessarily with my new boss. We have to know what we're doing and what the costs are. Now, research has shown, and I have my resources at the end so you can look this up, that there are different approaches at different parts of the negotiation. The first is accommodator or competitor. And then we want to avoid anxiety, because what's important is this confidence at the beginning. What we're doing in the very beginning is called anchoring. Does anybody know what anchoring is? It's setting the price. So we're setting the conversation. Okay. Now, if I'm accommodating, I can let you set the price. If I'm competitive, I can set the price. This is important, though, because whoever sets the price sets the conversation. So if I say X amount of money, then we're talking about X amount of money and everything relative to that X amount of money. There's a pro and con to this, because if I'm right on, and I know I'm right on, then that's conversations in my zone. If I'm wrong, if I went too high, I have made them anxious. If I've gone too low, I've messed myself over, right? So accommodating means that maybe I'm letting them start, I'm asking them some questions. Competitive comes in and basically says, "I kind of don't care because this is important to me." That's what I was doing at the car dealership and saying, "This is what I'm willing to pay, period. And I do not care if you say no, because I will leave and go someplace else," right? But this is how people start. We anchor. Someone has to anchor. And by the way, when we do anchor, when we do set the price, we're trying to go for a range. It's much harder to say, it's much better to debate range than say one particular number. Because our odds are much better. Especially if they care about us, which they do, because it takes a lot of time to hire somebody. It takes, Rhea and I were talking earlier that she applied in April and was hired in October. So if we got to the negotiation phase and it didn't work, that would be painful to me. It would be painful to her as well, but to me too, because that's a lot of wasted time. So I have an interest at that point in getting her in, and she has an interest in coming by that point, right? Okay. So in the middle, the collaborator works best because that's when we're trying to this is what you want, this is what I want, and we're trying to look at options, okay? At this point, now we've practiced before, we want to practice the anchor. Here we want to think about our answers. So if somebody says X, this is what I want to say. This is what I'm going to say. If they do this, this is what I want to do. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. What we want to avoid here is anger, which is obvious, but we want to not be what we mean is not being reactionary, right? I don't want to be like, well, that's incredibly insane. Are you kidding? No, what we're coming back to is, that's interesting. This is what I'm thinking. Or my reaction to that offer is this, because I can't do X if I don't have Y, okay? Finally, at the end, that compromise is best. Giving something up, letting them give something up. We want to avoid being too obvious and being too excited, but we do want to stay positive, and we want to outline expectations at the end. And later on, what we'll talk about is we do want to get offers in writing. And after each conversation, we want to follow up in email. It feels obnoxious, it seems silly, but you'd be surprised how many people forget things immediately after. We don't want to assume they're doing that on purpose. A lot is going on, and usually they have a meeting with you, then I've got a meeting with somebody else. So get this in writing so we make sure everybody's clear. At the start, there are a few predeterminants. The Bottner, does anybody know what a Bottner is? It stands for Best Alternative to Negotiated Agreement. Does anybody want to guess what that means? In effect, it's just like it says, what are your alternatives? I'm looking at, do I have any job offers, other job offers? How badly do I really want this job? What is my minimum and my maximum? If I have no other job opportunities, and by the way, you cannot lie and say you do, then I might be a little more compromising. I might be a little more lenient. If my best alternative is actually a job that I like less than this one, I might be a little less rigid and be more excited because I'm getting some kind of, psychological benefit from the job, not just money, not just lab space, not just, people to supervise and work with me. If the opposite is true, if this is my last resort, if this is just the job that I'm taking because I think it'll pay more, then I might be a little more picky and a little more shrewd. So that we're looking at, where do I stand? The next here is our reservation price. I look at three things. I look at what my absolute lowest is, and I look at the entire offer. I'm not just talking about money here. So if we're looking at, say, an academic job, for example, I'm looking at lab space. I need to make sure there's a centrifuge. I need to make sure that I have mice. I need to make sure I have this many postdocs. And in fact, in academia, you'll find that money is not something that we negotiate as much. We're more likely to negotiate things like teaching and space and those types of things than we are, maybe start date, relocation costs, than we are to negotiate salary, especially since in academia, you can sometimes supplement that, and in fact are expected to supplement some of your salary, at least by the time you're tenured. Right? So then I look at my maximum. I call this my Lamborghini offer. So I think about, I would like all of these things plus a Lamborghini. Right? So this is my high end. And then I start looking at the middle. So what are the things that are most important if I start ranking them? Knowing this ahead of time is going to help you throughout the process. When they start talking to you about things, when they start asking you what you want, when they start telling you what they want. This is what I start taking things off the table, adding things, and moving them around. Know these 3 things ahead of time, and those are your reservation. But your lowest, your reservation price is your absolute lowest that you could possibly live on or are willing to live on. And then your ZOPA, your zone of possible agreement, and that middle space is your zone of possible agreement, right? So this is where I think we can both be happy, right? This is achieved by conversation, knowing them ahead of time, knowing your sector, knowing the company, knowing the organization, knowing the people, and then of course knowing yourself. So this is the culmination. So in pairs, we also need to know what is negotiable, right? So I'm going to have you get in pairs now and just discuss what you think is possibly negotiable in any job offer, okay? So get together. We won't take 5 minutes. We'll only take a few minutes. But some of these, I don't want to give you an exhaustive list because honestly, this changes by field. So introduce yourself to your partner. And ask them what sector they're thinking of applying to. And take 2 minutes to discuss, 2 or 3 minutes to discuss what you think is negotiable in a job offer. All right, let's wrap up. A couple more seconds. What are some things we know are negotiable in general? Title, okay. Salary, benefits. Like what? Vacation time. Maternity. Well, maternity leave, yes and no. So there's a set amount of time that you get government-wise. But the company can or cannot, may or may not give you more, right? Anything else?
Equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that.
Precisely. Space, okay. Work hours, yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Joining a company, startup shares.
Yeah, the startup shares, your startup package, which is often bigger than something else. Yeah, your academic startup package, exactly. Yes. How many people are on your team, right? Yeah, yeah. So I would say especially in academia, when we're thinking about how many people will I start with, right? Pardon? Appointments? Oh, how many appointments will I take? That's true. That's true, especially in counseling, in our office. But then as a business associate or something to that effect, certainly. In consulting, we might, how many clients do I start with? How many projects?
Take a year off.
Yes. We have to be careful with that, though, sometimes, because if we are at a teaching university, or if we're at a university that values teaching, then asking for that time can be a little tricky. So we definitely want to wait and make sure that we've had an offer in hand, which is the rule in general, but especially in that case. Pardon?
Time limit to spend all the money.
Yeah, that's true. That's how long you have on that, especially, again, if we're looking at academia. So they will often have an offer that kind of descends, right? So you'll start with this much the first year, the second year, third year, and by then you should be an independent PI with your own amount of money, right? So that's true. I was thinking about maternity, so stopping the clock on the academic job market. Am I able to stop the clock? And at Stanford, I believe the rule is you can stop for 1 year per child. So, if you are a little lagging behind, have a child. No, I don't know that it goes that way. But they do try to be sensitive to that. Is there anything not negotiable? The 10-year clock? Well, it's sort of negotiable in this case, maternity, paternity. But no, in general, it's roughly you've got 4 years, then you're up for review. So yeah, that's a good point. A 10-year clock is usually not negotiable. What is required of the tenure is also not usually negotiable, in that it's set by the department or set by that. And that's why I was questioning you about benefits as well, because things like insurance, we have a policy, and you can't just bring in your own insurance carrier. So those things are not negotiable. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
But on a long term, right, if a lot of people that negotiate ask about more benefits or longer maternity, that becomes negotiable, that the policy might change.
Hopefully, yeah. But there's something
still help hold up for you at the moment.
Right. Well, you bring up a good point, though, because the best time, and this is another reason why this negotiation piece is important, that the best time to negotiate is when you're in the middle of an offer, right? So it doesn't necessarily do you any good unless all 500 candidates that day or that month are saying, we want Aetna, But yeah, you're right. Once you start, you could try to change that, and they might you hope that they monitor patterns, right? Okay. Do we have a better understanding of what we can ask for? In theory, we can ask for most things, again, if we can make a case for it, and if we do so respectfully. And that's what we'll talk about next as we talk about middle ground. So the middle of the negotiation, we can't really talk about negotiation without understanding assertiveness. Most people think assertiveness is action and consequence. My professor went late, and I sat in the class even though they went late, and therefore the consequence was I missed my next appointment. How many of you think that's pretty much true? Action, consequence. Okay. Are you not raising your hand because you think the fact that you're asking, Stephanie, means no? You're right, very good. It's a belief system, actually. It's the belief in the middle, right? It's the belief that I have to stay because my faculty member went late. That's what made me late for my next appointment, okay? So all of those of you who were confused before, are we less confused now? Yeah. This is an important thing to understand. We need to know what are your beliefs about assertiveness. If you think that assertiveness is mean, if you think assertiveness is aggressive, it will affect the outcome of your negotiation. If you think that you have a right to $100,000 more than what they're offering, that belief system is going to affect the outcome of your negotiation. Now, the caveat is it could affect it well. It could make it positive. It could also make it very negative. Okay? So your beliefs matter. What I want to tell you is that negotiation is, again, about collaboration and about a relationship and maintaining that relationship. It is not mean. It is not aggressive unless you act aggressive. So, for example, let me tell you a little bit about assertiveness. This is very funny. I used to do talks, consulting on negotiation. And we were talking about this, and we had a woman who came in, and she says, you know what, Stephanie, all this talk about assertiveness is all well and good. She goes, but I want to tell you it doesn't work. And I said, well, tell me. What happened? And she says, well, I am an executive assistant, and I sit outside my desk every day, and every day the guys come out, and they throw things on my desk, and they say, this okay? Gonna have it done by morning? Thanks. And then they go out, and then they have coffee and drinks together, and they leave me all alone. So she says, I decided I'm going to be assertive. So I came up, and I just said, last time they put it on my desk, I just got up, and I said, you know what? This placating stuff doesn't work. And she goes, you know what? They were mad. That didn't work. Is that assertiveness? What is that? Is it passivity? Kind of aggression, right? Or passive aggression. And it's the same with negotiation for salary. If you come in and you tell me I owe you something, if you come in and you don't know what you're worth, then I'm going to react to that. So check your beliefs at the door. Understand what you are worth, and ask for that. You have a right to ask for it. If they don't give it to you, it is not the end of the world. There will be other jobs out there. There are very few Stanford grads working at McDonald's unless they want to. So assertiveness is not. It is not aggression, passive aggression, passivity, or selfish. It looks like this: trusting people, trusting yourself, knowing you deserve this, and being able to back that up, stating information. There's a difference between saying, well, so I was kind of thinking my friend makes a little more than me and she's not doing as much as me, so I was kind of wondering what you think. There's a difference between saying, thank you very much for the offer. I'm a little concerned because my colleague over at the associate dean's office is making X with this title. Can you explain to me why there's a difference? That is a statement, and it's asking for clarification. Because if you come up to me with, well, I kind of sort of think, I'm going to say, well, I kind of sort of don't know. And I don't trust that you are going to fight me on this. I don't really think that our employers really do want to lowball you. I really don't. There's a belief out there that they do. Some might. I don't believe they do. It's quite costly and time consuming, and we want you to be happy. And I really don't want to have to go through this with you in another year. So I want to start you off well. But the fact is that if you come in and you don't ask for what you want, you don't know what your worth is, then I probably will move forward with what I've got. So anyway, again, asking questions, that consistency. Don't waver back and forth. Well, that's kind of good. And then ask me tomorrow about something else. It also takes patience. So again, like I said, from April to October, Rhea and I were talking and we were interviewing and all of this stuff. But I think we're happy now, right? I'll pay you later for saying that. There's a few barriers. Distributive issues, like I said, the distributive is when we don't know if we're going to see each other again, or there's some assumptions about the relationship, that the relationship is maybe more valuable to me than you, or vice versa. And there's some experiences that we have in negotiation that are uniquely distributive. For example, if we haven't anchored well, so if you come in and you don't know what your price is, or we're kind of talking around price, that's confusing to the relationship. It's confusing to the conversation, okay? And it means that we're not being assertive. Nobody wants to say, the range is X and Y, right? Nobody wants to say it. Somebody's eventually going to have to say it, right? And if you're not comfortable doing that, that's fine, but this could go around and around for a long time or fall. Inadequate preparation, or not knowing yourself, not knowing what your goals are, not understanding them. Your arguments are not very persuasive. You don't have an argument. Integrative is very important, though, these issues of not knowing who they are, what they're about, where there could be some similarities. This failure to build trust is imperative. We do an exercise last year, not in this year's class, but the year before, in our biotech business and finance class, we did an exercise where you had to pair up in teams and discuss. One was a movie producer and one was a screenwriter. And they had to come to an agreement, and each side knew basically the zone of possible agreement for themselves, and they had to kind of come to an agreement. But the screenwriter actively, in one of the groups, actively lied to the producer and didn't know that the producer had the correct information. So the screenwriter lied about what they made on their last film, but the producer knew what they made on the last film. And after that, the negotiation was over. They were really angry. They did make up for it. They said, I'm sorry, which is what we do. We are vulnerable, we admit our flaws, and we move forward. But I don't know if you want to hire somebody who's lying or if you want to work for somebody who's lying. So that building trust is imperative, is important. The compatibility issues too, when we have people who are bluffing, that issue of kind of bluffing, or we feel like they're bluffing. There is a good rule here in job searching that if it feels weird, it probably is. And we don't necessarily know it at the time. We usually know it afterward, which is why coming to talk to us about the experience is important. Talking to your friends about this is important, what the experience has been like for you, because we don't always know it's weird until we start talking about the experience, right? So if it feels weird, it probably is. There's some habits that constrain. I'm going to bring them all up and then focus on the last ones, because there's some good examples from here. When we look at skewed vision, I'm going to talk about 3 areas of skewed vision. Reactive devaluation. Here's an example. I had a student who came into my office one time. This was during the first .com bust. He came in, he said, the funniest thing happened. I had 3 job offers. He had his PhD in physics. I had 3 job offers. And all of a sudden, all 3 stopped talking to me. I was like, ooh. Now, first of all, after the .com bust, it was rare to get a job, let alone 3. So this is weird. I said, what did you do? He said, well, I tried to negotiate. I said, okay, what did you say? I told them I got my PhD from Stanford University, so I needed more money. What did he do wrong? Yeah. As soon as PhD was worth more, in a bad job market, in the Bay Area, where there are a lot of PhDs. Yeah? He did a couple other things wrong. What else? Yeah. Yeah, do we like him after that? No, we don't like him. That's what this is. Reactive devaluation is, I don't like you, so now I want to hurt you. So I don't see your value anymore, right? Out of reaction, I now have devalued you, right? We do the same with employers. They say something that's a little weird when we're interviewing. We don't really like them very much. And so now what do we want to do? I want you to take you for all the money you're worth. Right? The second one here is biased assimilation. So this one is when I assume something. And then all of my assumptions are just confirmed by your behavior. And it's an outlier if it doesn't confirm. Okay? This is why we have issues like with youth and on the job market or gender, right? Because if this is why, for example, I never wear pink in a meeting with when I'm with a man, because I fear that every time I talk or every time my voice goes, you know, I fear that that bias will be proven that I am a dippy blonde woman. Right? I fear this. It is the same in interviews. If I think young people are incompetent and you are 5 minutes late for your interview, you have proven to me that young people are incompetent. If I think that old people are incompetent and you come to the interview and you can't get your iPad to open, you have proven to me. So this is why understanding bias in interview is important. It's important to know your own biases as well. It's important to know the culture of the company to which you're applying. Because if they don't have statements about race, gender, sexual orientation, age, etc., if they don't have diversity statements in their materials, I'm concerned. Right? You may not be. You need to think about your own biases. But that does exist in negotiation as much as interview. Yeah. No, because people are human, right? And like maybe 5 people wrote the diversity statement and we have a company of 5,000, right? But it's a start. Right? It says something if it's not there. So I, for example, when I was looking at graduate schools, this was back in the 90s, and if sexual orientation was not in their diversity statement, I didn't apply. It didn't protect me, but I was less likely to be worried, right? So it's something to think about. Know your own biases as well and try to catch them. The final skew here is naive realism. So this idea that what I think is to be right is right, right? So I think, so an example was from the very beginning when this woman from a consulting firm, she came in and said, I want to go into higher education because I want better work-life balance. Now, I don't believe I have work-life balance, right? What I heard her say was, I want to come and just relax and put my feet up on your dime. That's what I heard, because in higher education, I believe I work really hard. Now, I think my hours are different than, say, consultants. And some of the pressure I put on myself is because I care deeply about what I do. But I also want somebody who does care deeply about what they do. Right? Now, that's a bias I have. Right? And I think culturally it's something she should know about higher education. It's something I need to know about myself. But it did make me in that moment think she's not going to fit in. So check those biases at the door. More importantly, ask questions first. What our guy in the beginning should have said, instead of saying, well, I'm at Stanford, what he should have said is this negotiable? I'm a little concerned about the salary. It's a little lower than I had expected. He could have even been really friendly and personable and said, you know, listen, I know that no matter what you offer me, it's going to be more than my little piddly salary as a graduate student. But I am getting started off on my own in the Bay Area. And so this is what I was expecting. And then we like him, don't we? Right? Then we're like, yeah, I get that. The Bay Area kind of sucks. And the PhD, you know, you spend a lot of time. We like him all of a sudden. And being liked is important in this situation. Joint outcomes, think about the entire package, not just each issue. Consider your Bottner annual reservation price. Sharing information. People are always afraid of this. But initiate limited information and seek reciprocity. So we can look at environments. If we're worried about maternity leave, we can look at how many people have pictures of their children on the desk, right? We can start asking little questions like, why did the last person leave? Or can you tell me a little bit about what's space like on campus? And then start looking and seeing where those little things are. We can start with the information. We don't have to go to it right away. Checking our assumptions before making the assumptions, right? Propose if-then. What happens if this exists? If we do this, what if? Right? So we can check our information before going straight on, like I said. Explore multiple options. Do a brainstorming with them. We always start with, thank you very much, I'm excited about the offer. We start with, is this negotiable? Here's what I'm thinking. These are a few options that are important to me. What's important to you? And in the future relationship, we want a balanced outcome for both relationship and sustainability, as we saw with my friend in the beginning who went to her dream job and ended up leaving it very soon. So again, remember what our zone is. We want the zone of tolerance where we're both giving some things up, we're also losing some things. We're okay with that. In the end, why do people leave value on the table? They don't know their interests and their capabilities. I mean, I had a student one time, similar actually, she had 3 offers in the middle of a down economy, and we were talking about negotiation. I said, what's your pitch? And she said, well, I don't know, why would somebody hire me? And I was like, well, they wouldn't if you don't know why they should hire you. If you don't know why they should hire you, then why would they? So a lot of people leave things on the table and don't get what they want because they don't ask, or they don't know they should, they don't know they could. Not probing for a full set of interests, so not asking enough questions. Not building trust, like we said. Excessive value claiming, so this is that posturing. Well, I do this, and we're getting lost in the whole process. It basically becomes a bragging session, and it's not collaborative at that point. And at that point, it's a good time to compromise and let go and let them be the bigger person, or decide I do not want to work for this person and I'm gone. And the information is a two-edged sword. So you've given too much, or they've given too much, right? So but one of us has been too vulnerable and it's not been working out. Okay. For agreement, let's remember there's attitude and then there's the approach, right? So our attitude, we need to know our predeterminants. We need to be confident in that. You need to know you want the job. You need to learn what you can about them because it's about both of you. Stay positive throughout. Again, I'm really excited about this job, specifically this. And I'm concerned about this. You know what would make this job better? Is this. You know what would make this offer better? Is if we could add X to it. Adjust and stay flexible. Right? So this is that this is, well, maybe we could try this. Have you thought about this? Notice what I said in that last statement. I didn't say but. This job is great, but. What I said is, this job is great, and do you know what could make it better? We try to get rid of buts as much as we can. And our approach, make sure you're negotiating with the right person. Okay, so this is always a question. Should I negotiate with the recruiter? Should I be negotiating with the hiring manager? I would maintain a very open relationship and open dialogue with the hiring manager. Because ultimately, the hiring manager cares more about you. It's not that the HR person doesn't. It's that the hiring manager is the one that's more invested in you. The HR person may not know exactly your value because they may not be in your field. They do have several requisitions that they have to fill, and they do have, say a range that they kind of want to meet, right? The hiring manager is the one that's like, no, must have you. So try to maintain this open dialogue. You're usually working with the HR person. You're working, doing the baseline with the recruiter. But I do think you want to keep in touch with the hiring manager as much as possible, okay? Don't go over their head, but check in. Discuss a range, not a number, like I said. I always try to get them to give me a range. I always say, what is your range? What did you have in mind? But that does allow them to anchor. So ideally, one way or the other, you maybe know what the range should be. Agree on a follow-up time. So let's say we're having this negotiation and I have said, okay, this is where we want to stop. I have to get back to you and let you know. Find out when they're going to let you know. Because offers have an expiration date. So this is what happened to our guy with the 3 offers who was from Stanford and very important. What had happened is they said, well, we'll just get back to you. And then they let that time pass. So they'll say, we need to have an offer by May 15th. And so they just sort of let May 15th come and go. Try to get a date and then follow up on that date if you've not heard from them. And get an offer in writing, and like I said, follow up in conversation and email. 5 questions to ask before you say yes. Number 1, were you treated well? Number 2, how do they treat each other? Number 3, is the company financially stable? 4, I think I have 6 here. I think I maybe miscounted. Okay. But number 4, is the organizational culture a match with your style? 5, how does your role fit into the team and company? And 6, what is your gut feeling? Do you feel okay about this? And if you're lucky, at the end of the day, you have payday. Are there any questions? Ria's going to pass out your payday. Yes. So that depends. In academia, it's pretty standard to ask for the whole thing, the exhaustive list. They're just expecting it. And in fact, we'll ask you in the middle of the interview sometimes what your package is going to be, right? And so I tend to think, I would not want to be surprised. So I wouldn't want to get through the salary hoop and then have somebody say, oh, and then by the way, I need this, right? Especially because it might affect how I answer to A, right? Now that you want to start later, then that affects what this is, right? So I might, if I have an exhaustive list and it's not standard, I might divide it into some categories. I have 3 concerns. One is in terms of general pay, one is in terms of startup, and one is in terms of lifestyle, right? So I'd like to start with pay first because, to be very honest, that's what's most important. X, Y, and Z. That makes sense. And by the way, we are videotaping this, so it'll be available on our website afterwards. But yeah, does that help? Get it into some categories so they know, so they're not completely surprised at the end. Yes.
So if there are some of the things that I'm not going to ask for, but it's standard to ask for, we need it, substitute that with something else. Like, let's say, for a faculty to ask for a partner, right? But if you don't have a partner, there are some benefits that you can get that way. Could you substitute that with something your salary, for example? Is that normal?
Possibly, yeah. So I don't know how strong a case that is. I mean, I don't know that how I would react if